Hey, so I'm gonna just try doing this live. I've not touched leather in like a month. I've just not really been in the mood, but I wanted to, so I'm gonna try this. It's a pattern I've already made, and I've already done a couple of it. This is for a pouch. So this is the pattern. It's just a piece of paper. And it's got some pencil marks on it. It's got some holes punched in it. Like it's nothing crazy. Um, Ultimately, I take four of these. I put stitching lines around the edge. I stitch all four together, fold them inside out, and that makes our pouch. So we're going to try this. It's just very, very simple, very basic. And yeah, let's just do it. I'm very tired right now. I don't know why. I'm not sleeping well, but you know, life. So I'm using deerskin. This is pretty soft leather. It's very supple. It also stretches surprisingly easy. Um, so in that, I'm just making a little pouch with it. If I do a larger one or the gusset on a larger one, I've learned that I can just uh, contact cement it and stitch it to, say, a backing, which will be another supple leather. I've used this green before and it's really, really nice. I've done that before just to kind of beef it up, get it a little thicker. But for this, it's just a little pouch, like maybe for like a little coin pouch. So I just need just a little bit. So first thing is like you want to use as much good leather as you can. You want to not waste. So you set up your pattern in a way that you use the best of your leather without wasting too much of it. So I wouldn't just like cut it straight out of the middle because I would waste everything around it that I could use later. I'm not too fond of this edge of the leather, this like wing, so I'm just gonna cut that off. So I'm not too worried about that, and if I wanted to, I could use it for a smaller project later. Same with this up here. Also, I got some new lighting, so I'm also trying that. It's a little blinding, but at the same time, I can see what I'm doing for or on the leather itself. So I'm getting these as close together as possible, just like I said, to be as efficient as I can be. I'm just tracing around this. I made this pattern on cardstock so it can hold its frame while I trace and I can reuse it. I've made two pouches like this already, and yeah, it's off the same pattern. So I need to make four of these panels, which is arguably the hardest part of this entire process. So like I move the pattern while it's tracing or between tracing lines, so it's not a big deal, you just move it back. On this one, all of these edges are, well, most of these edges are going to be on the inside, so I don't really need to be like super perfect with it. Actually, no, all of the edges will be on the inside because when we stitch it, we'll fold it inside out, so all the stitched pieces will be inside. So yeah, it's gonna be fine. Yeah, fucking. I'm allowed to use a straight edge. That worked fine. Scraps. On this one, I'll use a straight edge, just so I can get this line how I want it. Just using a rotary cutter. This is very, very, very basic. honestly, this is the hardest part because this leather is so like stretchy. Getting a good line cut into it is tricky. So what I can do is kind of separate these pieces before I actually cut along their inside lines. That way I can do my line cutting with a straight edge and a rotary cutter, which is much, much, much easier. I wouldn't want to use a rotary cutter in between these because then you might hit the next piece. That's something you always have to just be a little cautious of. I know my hand's blocking the camera, but I need it there. Yeah, so that's easy enough. Got a scrap box, I'm not just throwing it on the floor. Now these at the top are going to be part of the throat of the bag, so I want to make sure that I cut the line all the way off. So I cut on the inside of the line, if that makes sense. That way there's nothing visible to be seen there. With these side lines, it's not as important. Just cutting down the line itself. If you can still see some silver here from the pen, it's not going to make a difference because, like I said, it's going to be inside the pouch. But these at the top will be exposed. Same with these at the bottom, not really exposed. Doesn't have to be perfect, and any little extra when you stitch, that's just a little more to hold it, because I'm only stitching about 1/8 of an inch in. Yay. So that's one. Oops. That's one. And I gotta do 4 of these. So just a whole lot of simple cutting right now. This is going to have a nice little drawstring across the top that'll hold it all together. And if I can find it, I think I might have one more deer tip toggle left that I can, like deer antler tip toggle left that I can use on the drawstrings. Another thing I'm doing, like when I set the straight edge, I set it so that my project is protected by the straight edge. So that if I were to cut and go off the straight edge, I'm not going to cut into my project. As long as I hold the straight edge down and this leather, it's not going to slide around on. That keeps me from making stupid mistakes and cutting into pieces and then having to make more and waste more leather. So that's 3. And that's all 4. So these have a top grain and a flesh side. With that, that just means this is the outside of the skin, that's the inside of the skin. It's a little darker, it's the suede side. So what I can do with this is I can actually set the pouch up so that these alternate. So it's dark light, just different shades of brown. One thing I've done with other ones is I've taken 2 of these and used that green, this olive green, and I made it half brown, half green, just alternating panels. So there's a lot of options with this. But I'm just gonna do a simple brown on brown pouch because it's easy. One thing else with the pattern, I've got these holes. Hey, you can't see that. There we go. I've got these holes already punched into it. That's for rivets. There's a strap loop, like there's a placing for the strap, so that's only going to be on one panel, and then the rivet holes across the top, or those, not rivet holes, there's going to be holes, that's what the drawstring is going to go through. I can set an eyelet on those if I want, I can leave it blank. I haven't quite decided what I want to do with those yet, but I've got options. On my previous ones, I think I just left them blank, because on this material, eyelets don't always set the best, because they just curl around and grab onto the leather, but if it's like supple, it doesn't always take hold. But we'll play with that. Then, like I said, I'm going to have stitching about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge, so I went ahead and marked that on the pattern just to kind of remind myself this is where I need the stitching. Nice and simple. Also, having not touched my leather in like a month, I kind of forget where all my stuff is, or the process I do things in. So forgive me if I'm a little scattered, just a little kind of frazzled, and I'm very tired. I don't know why. So, just set up my table a little bit. Gotta get the little stack for the camera on this part, which is all spread out. Actually, I don't even know where the boat's right behind me. So yeah, honestly, this is what the table sits on. It's just another granite block, or not the table, the camera will sit on. It's just another granite block, a couple of rubber mats, and a cork block, just to get a little bit of height. I gotta get them all in the right order so it doesn't move around too much. There we go. That's not gonna slide. Hang on, don't drop the camera. Okay, we're good. Ta-da! Alright. I am a genius. And like I said, I'm practicing I'm trying some new lighting technique. So we'll see how it turns out, if you all can actually see what I'm doing. So using this pattern and a sewing awl, or stitching awl, I just lay it on top. I just poke a hole in the lines that I've designated to poke holes in. And this is just marking the top grain so I know where to punch the holes out. And on one of them, so this one, I'm going to do all the holes. Okay, that's just a mark, so I can kind of see it. I can actually touch those with this pen to make it easier to find. So I don't have any music playing today, so I don't know if I should say sorry or you're welcome. Yeah, so that's fun. Need rubber mats. Been sitting on the floor so long they're a little warped. Great. Because I store them vertically. Probably shouldn't. We were doing rivet holes, so I need a 3/32 punch, which is this one. And my mallet, which is this one. The rivets are the center holes on this one. Holes. Easy enough. And then the other ones are going to be for lacing. The lacing I have is 1/4 inch lace. I think I ran out of the 1/8 inch lace, but I can squeeze that through a 3/16 inch hole. So I'm going to do that. I'll set this toward the inside. Nope. This is making weird shadows. Come on. Oh, it's almost through. I think I've got a dull spot on this punch. There we go. Felt that separate. So another thing, the supple leather is quite spongy. So you don't always get a clean strike through it. So sometimes you gotta give it a little more oomph. Sorry, neighbors. It's after the workday. Deal with it. Come on, separate. Damn it. So that's one. I can do that. Just so you make sure all these holes line up, which they don't necessarily have to, but perfectionist me wants them to. I can just mark them. Two. Maybe going live the first time after so long is not the best idea. Oh, Brooke, the black surface is rubber. It's just very dense rubber. It's called Poundo board, and it's how we keep our tools saved while also deadening some sound from the punch. On top of this granite slab, if we strike it with this tool, it's going to dull quick. So we just use the rubber to save the tools. There's also options like they're cutting boards. And I've tried them, and they're great if you don't care about sound production, which my neighbors care about sound production. Oh, that's good. And on the note of sound production, this is a towel to try and eat some of the noise. Unfortunately, I'm on a fairly resonant wooden table, so it kind of makes a boom every time I hit. But it's after the workday. I don't really care. And they've not heard from me in a month. So they can deal with it. Easy enough. Good. Gotta clean up all these little dots before they get everywhere, as they like to. It's handy to keep a trash can really, really close by. Alright, so that's what my lacing is going to go through. And I've got the rivets for the one with the strap. I don't think I even have the strap cut yet or ready yet, but we'll figure that out as we go. I think I've got some of it prepped. I just need to actually, there's some. Yeah. It's this. I just need to actually trim it down to the width and then length that I'm going to want, because this is like really damn long. Probably 5 feet long. Folded in half, it can't even get all the way on the camera. It's huge. If anyone's wondering, this is actually the same material I made the sporran out of. It does this crease thing, so like, it's called the pull-up effect. And it's got these waxes and oils inside of it, so when you push up from the bottom, it actually changes the color and gives it a very distressed look, which is awesome. So I made my sporran pouch out of it. I've made some other straps out of it. It's just really nice, and it's very, very good looking leather. I love it. It's called Granger is the name of the cut, or the name of the tan. I'm not even sure. It's called Granger. Ooh. What was I doing? I need to cut the stitching holes, stitch it. Yeah, honestly, we're close. So for this part, I've got my stitching groover. What is my other one? There it is. So this is a stitching groover, and there's two, well, there's one kind with 2 blades. I've actually got 2, just so I don't have to swap out the blades. And the blades are, this one's just a blade, the center one. This is a guide that you guide off the edge of the piece, and then this is the blade itself. So that just imprints the leather. It's just straightforward. With this, the center blade isn't a blade. It's just a piece with a hole in it, and it actually cuts as it goes. And it'll, let's see if I can, aha, I've got some scrap right here. So you line it to the side, pull it along, and it cuts a groove, and it actually makes this nice little curly, which is just what you took off of the surface right there. So we do that as a stitching groover, so that gives the stitching a groove to sit in. So you can cut a groove, take your stitching chisel, which has a whole bunch of tines like a fork, you line it and set it inside that groove, punch through all the way down your piece. Then when you stitch it, the stitch sits down inside that groove, so it's protected across the top. Then you actually take a small hammer and tap it in there, and that'll keep it protected longer. I usually don't do that step just because it's an extra step. I have before, and it makes a really, really nice effect. But it's minimal. Like, you have to know what you're looking for to see it. So, yeah. Let's see. So the creases never go away. No, the creases can go away. There's a method you can use. Like I said, it's oils and wax that cause it. So you could take a hairdryer or a heat gun and actually heat it up and then massage it out, and it'll go away. If you want it to. If you don't want it to, you just leave it. I prefer to leave it because you can see, well, I don't know with this lighting how you're gonna see this, but like it gives it a really, really nice distressed effect. Like, yeah, that's a crease. Those are just wear marks, but at the same time, it gives it character. I much prefer the distressed look to just flat brown, but some people like brown. If you like just brown, I wouldn't recommend getting Grainger because it scratches extremely easily. Like, it's just sitting here, like just with the tip of an awl, it just scratches. You can, again, heat it up and massage those out and you'll get rid of the discoloration, but that scratch is still there. You'll get that a little bit as well in veg tan, but at the same time it's not as pronounced because of the color difference. So yeah, option. So on this, I don't want to cut into the groove because this is already very supple and the stitching is going to be inside. I'm not worried about presentation, so I'm not going to worry about the inset groover. I'm just going to mark about 1/8 of an inch, just so I can know where to stitch. And if I don't hit it exactly, I don't hit it exactly. So this is really cool. You just twist this and then you can slide that. And when you tighten it, it actually just pushes it up into its hole here. So it pushes up in its hole and kind of locks it in place. It's really just rudimentary. I love it. The simplicity of it. I'm going to set it to about 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, just the gap between the brace and the actual blade. And now I'm just imprinting the top grain, which you're probably not going to be able to see very well, if at all. I don't know if you can really see that. Maybe a bit. There's just a line around the edge, about 1/8 of an inch in. So that's just my mark to say this is where my stitching goes. I can do that as I go on each of these. Damn it, I need to write it down. I used to have the numbers for this size, how many down on each side and then how many down to the tip. Comes in handy, but I'll just wing it. I've done it twice before. So I don't want to set this all the way like point at the corner or at the edge, because then you'll just break it. So these tines are 3 millimeters apart, so I'm going to set it about 3 millimeters down, right on my groove, and all the way through. So right now it's in the rubber, all the way through. Pull it out, I've got holes on both sides. Now, and so I'm not guessing what the next interval is. I just put the last tine in the first tine in the last hole. Line it up with my groove again. So this has 6 on it. So that's 6 right there. And then I just covered up 1 and put 5 more new holes. So that's 11 holes. So it makes it really easy just to count it out. I can put 4 holes down to this corner. So 11 plus 4, 15 holes. So it's 15 along the sides. Now I'm putting 5 holes down the angle. There's 5, and not quite another 5. I'll just stretch it a little bit. Actually, yeah. Yeah, that works. With soft leather, you can also kind of fudge it a little bit because you can stretch it a little better. Again, this won't be exposed, you won't be able to see it, so it doesn't really matter if they're all perfectly even. So I just put it at the corner where I want it to be and then stretched, like just pulled down the leather until it lined up to the hole I wanted it to. It's kind of cheating, but it works. So there's 6, there's 5, so that's 11. So I've got 11 down, 15 down. I'm actually going to write that on this time so I know. if I can find my pencil. If not, well, can't find my pencil. All right, I'll just write it down next time, which I'm pretty sure I probably said last time. And then we do the same thing on this side. What's this? Sometimes they are, and that's definitely an option. I've done that before. I actually took a class. Let me grab the piece that I made in the class. One second. Yeah, so I've been in a class and we made this. It's just a nice little box pouch. Folds over, clips in. It's very, very nice. It's got D-rings on the side. You can put a strap on it. I've got the strap in my room. I swapped the strap out for clips so that you could put it on a belt. With this pouch, I did do each individual hole by hand. And while it came out clean enough, it doesn't always. If you do it like this, you've got more it's going to be correct. It's going to be evenly distributed. I know one leather worker who has a ruler, but instead of having like measurements on it, he's got his own tick marks for his own stitch length, and then he'll go through and put an awl at each of the stitches, and then he'll stitch it. That way, if anyone ever tries to take the claim of this is their piece, but it's actually his, he can say, oh really, pull out his little rule, hold it up to the lacing and say, well, that's my lacing, because it's not a set unit of measurement. It's not inches, it's not millimeters, it's just like his own spacing, which is really cool. I'm not super concerned about people stealing my stuff and claiming it's theirs because, I don't know, I don't do it that much and I'm not making a living off of this. If I was, I'd probably take action, but I'm not. So this side, same thing. Just trying to line it up to the other side of where we started. It's not going to be perfect. Doesn't have to be. 11. Taking 2. Yeah, this one's a little closer to the corner than the other one, but that's fine. So on this pattern, it's very important that you get a stitching hole right at the tip, because when I stitch all of these together, I stitch this line and then I stitch this line, and I cross that tip as the final stitch on each one, so every single one has 2 stitches through the final hole, and that way there's not an opening at the bottom, like even a small opening. It makes sure the bottom is held corner to corner. It's just a little bit of effort goes a long way. So just marking my, and I've worked on projects where I'm really concerned with like layers. If I have to stack layers, I'm really concerned with the holes lining up and the edges lining up. I've learned ways around that since, but when I hadn't, I would take the first one that I punched the holes in, set it on top of the second piece, line it up perfect. I would use stitching needles and I would actually hammer them into the rubber, and that would hold it in place, like 2 layers on top of each other. Then I would take my awl and one at a time mark each individual hole. Then I could take the second piece, line up those marks with the tines on the fork, or the tines on the chisel, and punch all new holes. But that's a pain in the ass, getting it so right. So what I've learned to do is, or no, I wouldn't even mark. I would just like push all the way through, and it's just trouble. So I get it close on both of them, but I give myself a little more meat around the pattern. So when I do finally stitch it together, I can go through and cut all the layers. Like I've got one piece that had 3 layers and one piece that had 5 layers. And I would cut all the layers as one, and then I would bevel the edges and just treat it as one very thick piece of leather and slick it together and use beeswax, and it actually seals it up, which I did on my knife sheath. So this is actually 3 layers, but I use beeswax to seal it up and then slicked it together so you can barely see the 3 layers. So I just made the pattern a little wider, and then when I finally stitched it together, I cut it down so it was the final shape I needed, and then I just dyed that edge. I think I stitched it while it wasn't dyed, then I cut it down, then I cut the stitching off, and then dyed every piece individually. Then I restitched them all together. It sounds like rework, but again, you get nice results. Like that's the edge of my knife sheath, and it's just beautiful and slick and all one piece. I love it. So we're poking holes. Yeah. I keep getting distracted by like, oh, I've done this in the past. $654, that's 15. Yep, and 11. Yep. 6. Yep, 11. Okay. Gotta write that down on a sticky note. Nice and easy. 15, 11, 11, 15, just so I know how many holes I need. Quick reference. I will write it on the pattern as soon as I find the pencil. I just don't know where it is. It's probably at my computer. Did I mark this? No, I didn't. I got distracted. Yeah. And that's 2. Yeah. Perfect. All right. So I've got my 4 panels. All the holes are around the edges. And those holes are in. We are ready to stitch them together. So, stitching is easy, but it's hard to do with a good camera angle. I'm trying to figure that out, so bear with me. Emily, it is easy. Like, that's the thing. Leather is really simple. Most of it, like 99% of it, is just basic construction. If you've got a solid pattern, you just make it. Hardest part for me is visualization to make this. What do I need to do? Like saying this is what I want to be my final project, breaking that down into this, because I don't have like I can't do drawings or sketches or anything like that. I'm absolutely awful with it. But I can't, that just means I can't sketch something out and say, okay, so for that I need this, and you just deconstruct it. So I have to start very simple and work on it. Yeah, a lot of it is you just gotta get the actual materials and the tools. I think I've spent, actually no, I know I've spent more on tools than actually leather. They're the most expensive part of this entire venture, but at the same time, you only have to spend that once. So eventually I'm going to get to a point where I've actually spent more on leather than tools, but I'm not there yet because I've got so many damn tools. But again, you don't go through mallets very fast. Like this one, I've had for so long, this got dye on it, and I don't even know when that happened. So yeah, it's just the tools. The tools are the worst part of it. So when stitching, you want to use, I use waxed braided thread, or waxed braided cord it's called, because it's like very, you cannot see that with this light. Oh, it's very, very thick, and I prefer that. I use these harness needles, which are like regular sewing needles, except the eye doesn't flare out at all. So it's the same width as the needle itself. So when you go through the hole, you don't have this massive eye with very little metal going through it. I tried with regular sewing needles, like right when I started. These also have a blunted tip, since we do all the holes ahead of time. So I don't need a sharp tip, so I'm not worried about like hurting myself. So when I did it with a regular stitching needle or sewing needle, number one, I poked myself constantly. Number two, I actually broke 2 needles right at the eye and had to like rethread needles halfway through a project. That was awful. Don't recommend it. It was bad. So yeah, with these, I love these. When you're stitching leather, and it varies depending on the thickness of the leather. With this, I could probably get away with 3.5 times the length. The thicker you go, the more thread you're going to need, because it has more up and down. It has to go as well as lengthwise. My general rule is I go 4 times the length of whatever I'm stitching. So I'm like, there's 1. That's like, say 1 with the angle in it. I just go 2, 3, 4. Just feed it out. That's about 4 inches or 4 times. I give myself just a hair more. I cut off. And then with these needles, it's the best. Because you just, it's braided, or it's waxed and braided, so it's very stiff. It makes a nice fine tip. And what you do is you bring it around the end, and you actually just poke it through. Right through the middle of the thread. And pull that down. That goes down. You just go down like that, and you don't have a knot following you through every single hole. The thickest it gets is just the thickness of that thread on itself. That's it. So you do 1 needle on each end. Nice and easy. If this were a larger project, I would actually skewer it twice. So instead of just doing once down there, I would actually fold it over again and do a second skewer and then bring them both down. It just helps kind of preserve it a little bit, but when I'm only stitching this much, I'm not super concerned with it. So the way this works. I gotta think on this. It's gonna be like this. It's gonna be like that. And then it's out. So I'll start with this one. Because I know I want this one to be like that. Except I want it to be like that. Yeah, let's see. I have not done this in a while. Just go through the first hole, grab both needles, both ends of the thread, and just even it up. I am not going to be able to do this at this angle. What is it? I'll figure this out real quick. Yeah, I mean that should, when I work down here, bear with me. Can you all see that? I don't even know what you can see or not. That's fine. Maybe a little further down. Yeah. Yeah, you can see that. Nope, too far down. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. See that? You can see it when I'm holding up here. Yeah, I just won't hold it too high, I hope. So yeah, go through the first hole. Just pull it to you. And you even the needles out pretty close. Then I'm starting every single stitch on the top grain side, since I can see those holes a lot easier than the ones on the flesh side. I just poke it through both holes like that, and then I drop the first needle. So I've got 1 needle coming through, and it's just hanging down here by itself. I've got the second needle, which is only through the first hole so far. And I bring it through, and I go through the exact same hole I just went with, or just went through this with the second needle. And I bring it together. So what that did, made a nice little loop right on that first hole. And we're just taking these two and just zigzagging them through. It's called a saddle stitch. So again, I start with the top grain first. Go through the holes. Set it down. I actually pull it towards me. I go on the far side of the hole. Now something I gotta verify is, like, every time I go through, I make sure I don't poke through or skewer the thread. Because I want the threads to be able to pass by each other in there. And if one's going through the other, they're not going to be able to move past each other. And we just continue like that. The longer we go, the more the holes line up, and it's nice and easy. So I've got 3 now. And if I just pull to get it tight like this, it's actually going to scrunch them all together. So instead what I want to do is I want to have both threads and pull the length of it. So it's tightening them, but it's not scrunching everything together. You're not getting a little ripple through there. Whereas if you just do this, it just ripples it. So it straightens the threads, kind of lines them up. Yeah, and we just keep going. With this, the biggest part is just consistency. Like, I always make sure the same threads are on top. I always make sure that I start on the same side. So I always put the top grain thread through first. Whichever thread is coming out on the top grain portion is going to go back in first. And then I pull it back to me and make sure it's under the next thread. So the next thread, I drop the first one, bring the second one over, use the thread coming out to line up my hole, get it going through, make sure I didn't stab through, and keep going. Every now and then I just keep them tight. Honestly, I very much love hand stitching because I think it's just relaxing. It's just methodical and nice. I wish I had some form of like video editing skills so I could like just do a project and then edit it out the boring parts, but I don't. I don't know which software to use. I've never tried it. Just sounds like a pain in the ass. But I do acknowledge that there are lots of steps in here that feel boring to watch, but I enjoy doing them. Also, one thing I'm doing is I've got my finger on the backside where I'm pushing through, and I'm actually feeling for the tip just to make sure if it comes through right. Because I can usually, and it's worse on thicker pieces or multiple layers, like more than just 2, where it'll go through 1 layer or 2 layers, but then on a 3rd layer the hole's not quite aligned and it'll just hit the back, so you have to like find the angle to get through. And you want to know when that needle comes through finally. So I've gotten in the habit of just putting my hand on the backside and just feeling when that needle comes through. Another benefit of having blunted needles and holes that are already punched for us. Yeah, Emily, I want help. Come on down. See you in about 12 hours. I know the drive. This is a time where music or an audiobook comes in handy. So right now I'm at the end of the straightaway, the first straightaway. And when if that's a bus ride, yeah. That's a long bus ride because they got to stop other places. So I'm at the end of the first straightaway. Just nice little stitches. It's all neat and even. One benefit of starting on the same side every single time and making sure the threads are consistent, which one's on top and bottom every time, means that when you look down the line, they all go the same way. Sometimes you'll get stitches that sit on either side of the center line, and that's what happens when you start to switch back and forth. It's not as big of a deal on this kind of supple material, but on, like, say this, which doesn't have any give side to side, you would definitely see, like, if you do all of them consistent, then there's one in the middle that you went backwards, you went under or went from the other side first, you would actually see it, and it sits a little to the side, or sometimes if they're at angles, if you use a slant chisel, it'll sit at an angle, and that angle will be like reversed from the others, and it's you got to know what you're looking for, but when you see it, it's an eyesore. So I'm going around the first corner here, and what that's going to start to do is once we open it up, once we get down to this bottom and we open it up, it's going to round out the shape of the bag, so it's not going to be as angular, which is what we're after. We want a round little bag. We don't want sharp corner bag. It'll be most noticeable once we actually flip it inside out. But our bag's not going to look like home plate. That's another thing, though. Sometimes I do this on heavier pieces after I've dyed it and after I've oiled it, and I'll have already had the holes punched before I oil it, so the oil is like it's almost like Vaseline in that consistency, and it'll sit inside these holes, and so when I push the needles through, they'll just collect the oil, and when it gets caught at the end here, I can't pull it because it's just slippery. I've seen some people use pliers, which I refuse to do because I don't want to mark up my nice little needles. I usually just bear with it and pinch harder, and sometimes use a towel to help get it out. Or I just make sure the holes are wide enough, and I just use my awl and just widen out the holes a little bit so it goes through easier. Oof. I just want to go down to the very last hole on the tip and then just stop. I'll show you what I'll do to stop because it's kind of neat. Just so I don't get a whole bunch of knots all at the base. And anyone who has a sewing machine probably knows what I'm about to do. Because the sewing machines can do it as well. I just like it when I do it. Second to last hole. All right, so this is the last hole. If I can find it. There we go. Find the hole on the tip. Yep. Story of my life. don't read too much into that. Okay. All right, so that's our stitch all the way to the final hole right at the tip. We're not going all the way around. If we were to go all the way around, this thing would just open like, and it'd be a tiny little pouch. But we want all four sides. So that's where we're stopping. What it's going to look like when it's flipped inside out, it's going to have this nice rounded edge. And it's going to be larger. And the inside looks like this. But I don't want to just tie these off and have them sitting right in the middle, because once I get all four stitched together, it's just going to be a lump of thread that I don't want. So what we do is we actually go backwards. I take the thread and I take the awl and give myself an opening on the holes. I'll go 3 back. So I'm going through the holes that are already there. I'm just doubling back the exact same way that I just came up. Same pattern, goes in, the next one comes over and through. What this is actually doing is it's locking it into place. We want to stab through the lace or the thread we already have in there. Just a bit, like not noticeable, but like it's going to be through it. Okay. So on this last one, we're not on the last one. I missed a hole. There we go. Okay. Now on this last one, instead of going all the way through both sides, I'm actually only going to go through one, if I can, and come out between the two halves. And I'm going to do the same thing from the other side, just through one, then up between. And then I'm going to, you can see that. So it's just splitting those. I pull those through. Now the thread is just coming out of the middle there. And now I'm going to tie my square knot after I make sure they're nice and straight and not wavy together. So right over left, tie it down in the hole, left over right, tie it down in the hole. Makes the knot so tidy and tight. That way, when I snip these, it's not sitting out in the open and exposed, and you can actually just press them down between the two halves and hide the knot. So you can't see where it starts and finishes. So that's 2 panels together. And on the outside it's going to look like that. So this is what I was talking about, the light and dark. And it's just going to alternate, so the next one's going to be light. So it's actually really weird because they like stack. If I were to go all the same shade, I would actually be like putting the top grains together and stitching it through. And so when I open it up and fold it out, the top grains are out. But since I'm alternating, I need to put top grain up, so when I fold it inside out, it alternates. So same thing with this one. We're going to do this like this. And instead of stitching this side that's already stitched, we stitch it to one panel on this side, so it'll open up in a line and give us our pattern. So yeah, it's just stacked. It's really weird. So this is as much thread as I had left. So I went a little heavy on thread, so I can actually shorten that up by a fair amount. Just to be a little on the conservative side there. Just gotta pull it off the needles. Oh, and pulling it off the needle is really easy because, like, the way we had it, it was skewered through, I just take the small tab and pull it down over the eye of the needle. And I just pull it out through the eye, off the tip, and it's out. So it's very, very, very easy cleanup. No small knots to deal with, no tangles. So 4 times as much. So this, based on what I started with, is not that much. You want to make sure that you don't get near the end and not have enough to turn the needle around and go back through, which I've done before, and that sucks because then, like, the easy way is just tie it off there and then start a new one at the same hole, but it looks kind of garbage. What I end up doing is cutting out the old stuff I already stitched and then going on. I'd rather waste this much thread than 3.5 times the length and then 4 times the length. Also, the length will shorten, and I mentioned this with the thickness of leather. So if I were to do like a piece this thick, or even heavier that I have, this thick, then you're losing length, not just lengthwise, but the up and down through each. And when you double that together, you're losing that much length every single stitch. With this, I would probably go 4.5 to 5 times the length, just because you're losing so much in the up down. Like, every single stitch you're losing about 1/4 inch, whereas with this, every single stitch I'm losing maybe 1/16 of an inch. No, maybe 1/8 of an inch. So you lose length, you also lose up down, and you want to have a little extra at the end so you don't end up with not enough to turn the needle again. Good question though. I asked the same. Yeah, it's not like, and no offense to people who work with cloth, because I can't fucking do it, but it's not the same as cloth because cloth can be so thin that you don't really notice that stitch length. With this, it's like do or die. Like, when I was stitching these together, this is the one that I did wrong the first time because I only got the stitch to here. Actually, no, it wasn't this one. It was my kukri, which I'm actually going to be remaking in the near future. It was this one, because I needed to get from here all the way around to here, and it's 3 layers thick. And this is why I'm redoing it, because the layers look like garbage. Like, it drops down inside there. It's just, I don't like this one. So, yeah, thick boy. With this one, I did 4 times the length, and I got to here. And I said, fuck. And so I went back, like, I unstitched it all, went, I think 6 times the length, and had a good extra. And then on this one, I did like 5.5. Just because the extra layer between added so much distance that the thread goes back and forth. And that's 3 layers. When I did this, the thread goes through the 3 layers here, but there's 2 extra layers here that it had to go through. So it goes through 5 layers at one point. That's a centimeter. Like, that's almost 1/2 inch. Just up, down. Every 3 millimeters, you lose a 1/2 inch thread length. I think on this one I did go 5 times the length. Which isn't that much because it's just, but it adds up. So the thicker the leather, the more thread you're going to have to use, because the more distance you're going to lose. With this, almost cloth, not super worried about it. But yeah, that's a really good question, because that was something I did not think about when I started stitching way back when. Way back when, like a year ago. Where was I? Where did I put my... There it is. Thread. So. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like eyeball it. Yeah. I'm trying to keep up with the comments, but also, like, the lights are right here. So I'm getting a little blinded, like, looking up, but I'm getting used to it. Also, when I did that kukri one, I think that one took it was like 3 or 4 hours total of just stitching one of the lines because the holes weren't lined up right. And it was just nightmare. Which is why I'm not looking forward to redoing it, but I need to redo it. I just don't like how parts of it turned out. Overall, I really love it. I get a lot of good compliments on it when I go to fair, but I need to make the same thing look better, if that makes sense. Same overall design, better execution. All right. Now, what I was talking about earlier with the tip, we've got this one hole down at the base. And this one has the same hole at that base. So when I stitch these together, that hole has to stitch through this one that already has thread in it. And then on the next one, which will be down this side, that hole is going to already have thread in it, and the next one's going to have thread in it. So I want to reuse that hole on each individual one. That's why I go down to a point and don't just put 2 at the end, because when I do all of that, they're all going to come to a single point in the center, and I'm not going to have an opening in the middle of the pouch, which is nice because I can't lose anything out of it, or it'd have to be really damn small. We need peck height. What is peck height? Are you 100% starting over, redo it, or just stitching? Oh, no, 100% starting over, redo it. Because of what I learned in doing this little knife sheath, I'm actually... Here, let me see. Also, this is the kukri, and I absolutely love it. It's beautiful Damascus, which is why I put the windows in so you can see the blade. Anyway, gotta do it. Yeah, so I have to actually redo entirely, because what I'm going to do is when I make these patterns, I'm going to give a little bit more meat down here at the bottom, like a good, probably ½ inch extra, ½ to ¼ inch extra, and then I'm going to stitch it all together, and then I'll just use my knife and shave it that close to the stitching and cut off that meat, and that'll put it all at the same level, which is what I did with this. And then I can use beeswax, like once I get the edges kind of slicked, I'll use beeswax and fill in any of those grooves that are left, and I'll slick those together, and that's what gives me this really nice edge. So yeah, this will be a complete redo. Also, I didn't like the angle that this went on, so I've got to do some figuring out to get that better. Just because when this sits in, and I want to snap it in, it actually ends up pulling the loop towards me, so I'm going to have to change the shape. There are things I need to do better. And I'm probably not going to do that one live because it takes so much time. Like, I'm fine doing these small projects live, but that's a big one. It just takes so much time. Also, I don't understand we need to see peck height. I don't get it. Oh, and for anyone just joining us, we are making a coin pouch. It's 4 panels stitched together out of deerskin. It's gonna be like this. And before we stitch the final panel all the way on, I'm going to have to make that strap that I've been putting off, which is what it's going to mount to the belt with. I just don't feel like doing it right now. Camera doesn't catch too far forward. Pec height is pretty much center camera. Oh. Here. Yeah, I'm really, really bad at camera angles and doing this. Also, what I've got it propped up against, I can't really see the middle of the camera. I can't see what I'm actually doing. I've just got to get a better... Like, I need to get an actual phone tripod, because right now it's balanced on a GoPro tripod. So where the small little active camera goes, where the GoPro goes, I can't see the picture, and it's right in the middle. Probably doesn't help that I'm wearing a black shirt, so there's like no contrast. Just occasionally I just cinch it up, make sure it's nice and tight. You're good, that's why I tried to... I appreciate the descriptiveness. The detail. Also, I think I was supposed to teach a class on this in like March, but then everything happened and I didn't. Who knows, maybe once all this is over, they'll ask me to teach again and I'll go teach this. Because it's a really easy project and there's like no dye work or anything like that. It's just simple. Nice and simple. I mean, if you really wanted to, also with this, you don't have to use 4 panels. You could use just 3. I screwed up. Went on the wrong side. Because when I fold this inside out, that'll fold inside out, but that'll be right side out. So I gotta cut it, take it out, and redo that part. I did this the first time I made one of these too. So yeah, I'm not quite ready to teach this yet. Yeah, I remember doing that. Okay. Yeah, everybody makes mistakes. That's embarrassing. Yeah, I did this on the first one I made. That was months ago. Oh, thanks for the help. Because I didn't know. Alright. Let's try this again. Back to square like 7. I'm glad somebody does. Also, that's why I have to move my phone every time I need to read a comment. Because it's blocked. Alright, let's see. Let's see this. Oh yeah, I think this is the part I hate because I have to go through the flesh side. Or something. I can't remember. Where did I put my thread? There it was. 1, 2, 3, 4. What voodoo magic? I have no voodoo magic. Well, if you can't admit you make mistakes, you won't be able to learn from them. Now, how do I want to do this? I need... like this, with that on the outside. That's it. That's on the outside, so this is going to be the outside. Yeah! No, because when I fold that, it's got to be like this. So when I open it, it's going to be like that. And that's the outside, that's the outside. Okay, yeah, this is it. This is it, folks. So I'll put it through, even out the thread length. Roughly, that's pretty close. All right, and away we go again. Damn it. See, this is the part where I'm just bad at visualizing. It wasn't until I got a good portion of the way through before I even realized there was a problem. I'm just talking, yabbering. Just doing my thing. And boom! It's wrong. Sure it's still even? It's close. We're good. It's almost like knitting with how repetitive it is. Do I know how to knit? No. Did I at one point in time? Yep. I learned when I was 8 years old. Hello, bird. There's a bird outside my window chirping. Not with knitting. God, no. That's not something I'm ever really interested to pick up again, honestly. I just much prefer this. I don't know, I just like making things. I just need to actually have the motivation to sit down and do it, which is rare. All right, we're getting to the point where we gotta go through like more than 2 holes here. Wait, no, we'll just go through this one. Yeah, so the last one went through these 2 layers, and I want to go through these 2 layers. So I'm going to go through the first hole and go between the 2 layers like I did when I finished off the first one. And instead of just going all the way through touching nothing, I gotta go through this last hole there. So I'm connecting this panel to that panel, which is already connected to that panel, and that's how that's done. Which is why it's important that you put a hole right at the base, right at the point. And then you go like this, and you go back. Make sure you didn't skewer any of those threads. Yep. And now I gotta just double back a little bit to lock it. So open up these extra holes with my awl. One. Two. And on 3, I separate the 2 halves. So go halfway with one, and then halfway with the other. Just like that. Pull it through. Get it nice and straight, tie it off. Right over left. In. Left over right. In. Here goes. Stuff it down inside that groove a bit. Actually, these I didn't cut as short as the last ones. Yeah, just a little bit. There we go. Yeah. This is wax thread, so like it kind of holds itself together. Now, it could just like sew these two together, and then that would be just a three-sided pouch, which is possible. It's just not what I'm after. So yeah, this is what this is starting to look like. And it's just got one more panel left to fill in the gap, which is this one. And this one, it's really easy to set this one right because you've already got the shape. I've just got to stitch this side, and I'm going to stitch this far side. But before I stitch that far side, I want to put these rivets and get the strap together. So I'm just going to stitch this side. Or could stitch this side and save the front side for last. Nah, it'll be easier to mount it like that. Okay, we're going to go like this. No voodoo magic here. Okay. Four. Almost did three. I'm not paying attention. It's a day. Get on. This is weird because it's like switching between left hand and right hand with which side's facing me. Because I'm used to going this way, and now I'm going this way down the seam. So I'm a lot slower at this one. Read well when I at last am sleeping. It's a story of those who always loved you. Also, I've been watching the Les Mis live versions, like the concert versions, and they're so good. I just haven't watched them in a few years, so it was nice to catch them again. I would say catch back up, but I was never really behind. Ugh. I've been sleeping funny. My right shoulder is just tight and sore and not happy right now. On this page, I write my last confession. Read it well when I at last am sleeping. It's a story of those who always loved you. Your mother gave her life for you, then gave you to my keeping. Kiss you where all the children play. Be at peace evermore. Was that? A child will want for nothing. Take my hand and lead me to salvation. Forgive me all my trespasses and take me to your glory. Alright, last hole. Connecting this one and that one. All right. Ooh. God damn. Yeah, lovely, Miz. All right, so I just have to double back on this side real quick. Lock this one in, then I'll do the strap, finish it out, put the lacing in, and we'll be done. And since this one's going to be for my own costume, I'm going to use silver rivets. because I like brown and silver. Other people like brown and brass. It's not my color. All right. All right, so that's most of our pouch. I've got one side left to stitch, just these panels together here. And then I've got to set the strap on this one, and that'll be it. Strap on this goes outside to inside, or in to out. It crosses over that boundary, so that's easy enough, as opposed to like just folding and then attaching to the outside. So I'm gonna need this guy. And with this strap, I said 1 1/4 inch strap. See, I wrote it on my pattern, so I can always go back and say this is the size strap I used for this pattern. I did not give myself a length. Nope. So that's how to guess. But that just means I got to cut a 1 1/4 inch strap real quick. So this is a strip and strap maker, or a strap cutter, or funny wooden blocky tool. And I'll show you how it works in a second. I love this thing. So this is it. It's got measurement on here. It's got inches and centimeters, all the way down to millimeters. In here, and you can barely see it if at all, there's a blade. It's just like a little razor blade. It sits inside of these grooves in the wood, and you actually set it so that the leather presses against. You set the measurement that you want to cut here. You set the leather against this, and you just pull it through, making sure that it's rubbing against the wood right here. And as you pull it through, it actually separates that thickness of strap of your measurement. That 0 point is the knife point. It's pretty neat. I love this thing. Yeah, I guess the demonstration will be actually doing it. Just like that. It's hard to just do it. Normally I'm like, it's sitting on a table or on the floor. I'm just pulling it as I go. I'm trying to do this in sight. Ta-da! Alright, and that's an 1.5 inch strap. I could even measure it and say, ooh, or sorry, 1.5 inch, 1 1/4 inch strap. Ta-da! Nice and easy. But that's also like 5.5 feet long almost, maybe 5 feet long. I don't need a 5-foot long strap on this tiny pouch. So I just gotta figure out what length I need, cut it down, poke some holes, and we're good. So we're done with that guy. Honestly, if it... First I want to tip it, because I made it so it can have an English point, which is in here somewhere. There it is. Alright, it's a tipper. So I set this on here. Actually, that's an inch. I need a larger one. So I find center, just eyeball it. So that's center. And it's got a tip on it. So for this pouch, it doesn't need to be super crazy long. It's gonna be like inside to outside. Yeah, that's pretty good. No need for exact measurement, it's just going to be hanging on a belt. I can just guide off of the tip here. That's my strap. Nice and easy. And then I want to set these holes. As close to center as I can. Just kind of eyeballing it. Just using my scratch awl, marking where the holes are going to be. I'll go ahead and punch through, mark on the other side, punch through. Okay. Need a second poundo under here. The punch is long. 3/32. I put 2 poundo boards because this punch is long enough that if I punch through this thin leather and a poundo board, it'll still hit the slab. So I put a second poundo board because it can't reach all the way down through that one. Ta-da! Alright, that's easy enough. I was marking where I want this one to be punched. And voila. It's going to be under rivet, so I'm not really worried about that discoloration there, because that's the size of the rivet anyway. So, let's go ahead and rivet it on, then we'll stitch up the last one and fold it inside out. So when I fold it inside out, yeah, the strap will be all the way outside. Just have to find my rivets, whichever one I want. There they are. Ooh, I don't want those big ones though, I needed smaller ones, which are in one of these boxes. Aha, this one. So, because this leather is so thin, I'm actually going to use, there are multiple sizes of rivets. And I'm not talking, well, there's like the diameter of the actual cap itself, but more importantly, there's the length of the post. So there's like a medium and a small, as I think of them. I'm just going to use the small because it doesn't need to be super long. It's going to go through this piece and this piece, and it's still going to have that much left over on top. So we'll put the cap there, rivet it down. Easy enough. Question, is that going to fully cover the... Yes, and it's still, even using a small one, still covers the discoloration, so that's good. All right, so I need the small caps. These are double cap rivets, which are the easiest to set, but of rivets, they're kind of the weakest, but there's only so many kinds of rivets. They're still really damn good. In your hole. The rivets come in all sorts of colors too, but I like the nickel look, but do I even have... Yeah, I don't like those. Okay, yeah, we're using nickel. Alright. Even there, it goes through that twice, and it's still got plenty sticking out of the top. And that's going to be on the inside anyway. Nice little rivet setter. Let's set it from this side. Ta-da! Rivets are set. Easy enough. So that's basically 3 layers. And now I've just got to stitch this last side together, fold it inside out, and it's going to eventually look like something similar to this. And then I'll put lace through these top holes, and it'll cinch it together at the top and make a nice little belt pouch. But we'll get there. All right. One more side to stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where did I put those damn scissors? Did I throw them back in there? No. Oh, they're there. So we're done with the thread, so it's in the box. And we've got this. All right. These needles have wax on them, so when you pull them through, it leaves a whole bunch of wax that gets really dirty right at the eye of the needle. So just gotta keep the needles clean every now and then. It's not like I stitch every day. It's not really an issue. Okay. So we're starting at the throat again. Also have no idea how long this video's been, but it's literally been start to finish with this project, so maybe 2 hours. If I had to guess, if I were a guessing man. I'm assuming that's a yep about the 2 hours. Well, there's a lot of pleasant noises in leatherwork. Also, it's like dead silent in here. Except for my stomach rumbling, which is not quiet. The last hole to this one. Okay. So I'm just gonna double it back real quick and I'll show you why, or what I was talking about with the no center hole thing. There we go. So it's going to be hard to show this, but with them all going through the same hole right at the tip, there's no real opening, like all the way through. Like there is, but honestly, it's absolutely, I can't even like show it on the camera because it's so small. Like it's super small. So I think I could fit, no, I can't even fit that point into it. And that's 3/32 of an inch. I could point, yeah, I can get a snug fit on the awl. Like it'll hold it, but that's it. So yeah, there's that. Then we just fold it inside out. I'm just gonna put some lace around the top of it, and then that's a coin pouch for a belt. Let me grab my lace. I don't even know how much of this to use. This is a 1/4 inch lace. It's Kodiak lace. It's really, it smells amazing. I love this. That's gonna be way too much. So I'm just gonna thread it through, and then once I get the length I want, I'm gonna cut it. I know I'm doing most of this in my lap just because that's easiest right now. Also, one thing about lace, it's not round. So like this is like flat lace. It's 1/4 inch wide, so I can make it so it's not twisted going through this, which gives it a nice feel and a nice look. Just keeping the top grain on the outside and the flesh side on the inside. There's going to be plenty of lace. Let's see. This will be easier. I'm not going to drop it on the floor. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, the holes around the strap are the hardest by far. Once those go through, it's a cakewalk. God, I miss cakewalks. Y'all ever do that when you were younger? Like at a festival or something? Because we did that at Fall Fest at my elementary school. It's like they would play music. It was basically musical chairs, but instead of chairs, it's spaces on the floor, and one of the spaces you get cake or something like that. I don't know. I was little. They give you like a whole cake because it's a fundraiser. No, 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 not stepping in the cake. Like there's a card on the ground that says cake, and if you land on the card that says cake when the song ends, you get a cake. Like an entire cake. They just give you a cake. It's a cakewalk. At least that's what we called it. I don't know if there's an actual word for it. Almost done. Just a few more holes. So this lace is too big to put the antler tip on, or the beads that I have, so it's just going to be raw lace just out there. Oh, it was great. It was a great idea of a game. How do you kill that which has no life? Mm-hmm. So that's the largest it'll be. So honestly, it's a lot of damn thread, or a lot of damn lace. I'm actually gonna back that out and save as much of this as possible because this shit's expensive. Fire? What fire? I missed that. Whatever reference that was, I missed it. Ugh, come on, bastard. Steve. Damn it, twist it. Oh, how do you kill that which has no life? Now, that was a reference to South Park, the Make Love Not Warcraft episode. Because it's funny as fuck. God, I hate these shivers. All right. And that's a pouch. Start to finish. Oh, I wasn't allowed to either. I just watched it when I was older. It's a nice little coin purse. These don't need to be that fucking long. There we go. And what I've done on others, I used smaller lace, which I'm pretty sure I'm out of right now. And I put an antler, like a deer antler tip that had 2 holes drilled through as a toggle to keep it closed. But yeah, that's a completed pouch. Ta-da! And there was much rejoicing. All right. Well, I'm gonna get off here. Hope you, if you watched it, I hope you liked it. If you didn't watch it, well, you won't see this anyway. So, let's see. What does that say, real quick? Thanks. That's one of my favorite parts about it is the alternating colors. It gives it a nice little texture to it. Nice, crisp design. I love these little things, and they're super easy to make. And it's actually my friend Elizabeth Collins who helped me come up with a pattern based off of a pouch she already had. It was just larger, so we scaled it down, and I kind of just tinkered with it and made it my own. So we went from this to this. If you have any questions about anything leather, or if you're just like really bored and want to chat, hit me up sometime. But in the meantime, I'm gonna get to playing video games. I hope you have a good evening, and I'll see y'all later. Okay, bye.